Welcome back to Beyond Chronic Burnout, the podcast where we go beyond the surface of burnout, digging deep into the strategies and tools leaders and individuals need to flourish forward, creating healthier, happier, and more energized teams and lives with a dose of play, joy, and laughter along the way. I'm your Chief Wellbeing Officer and host, Carole Jean Whittington. Today, we're diving into the world of mental health, community, and the burnout epidemic that's affecting so many professional women. I'm super excited to introduce today's guest, Stephanie Kaiser, founder of Say More, a virtual community dedicated to mental wellness, especially for women. Stephanie has an inspiring story of her own, having worked her way through the male dominated world of finance and experiencing firsthand the toll that burnout can make. From those challenging experiences, she is driven to create a platform where women can share their stories, find support, and foster mental well being through connection and vulnerability. In this episode, we'll explore Stephanie's journey, the importance of community in overcoming burnout, and her advice for women looking to prioritize their mental health in demanding careers. Get ready for some fun, practical insights and heartfelt moments as we talk about what it really takes to support women's mental wellness in today's high pressure world. So grab a cozy spot, maybe a cup of tea, and let's get into it.
Step out of the shadows, feel the power rise, catch the spark inside you, let your spirit fly. Beyond the chronic burnout, Carole Jean's your guide. Find your steady rhythm, life's joy on the tide. Flourish forward, bright and bold. Leave the burnout far behind. In this journey, hearts unfold. Power's yours, seek and find.
Stephanie, welcome to the show, Miss Fancy Pants. You and all your big corporate work, but boy, are you doing something powerful now. Oh my gosh. When we are talking community this month, guys, ladies, human beings, we are talking something really powerful today with Stephanie, and that is all around women's mental health and community. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. So, burnout and women's health. I mean, we got a lot to talk about today, do we
Yeah.
not?
Right.
But I find that, to really kick off the conversation, I always love to hear what has been your experience of burnout, Stephanie? How did you come to the awareness and the knowledge that you had experienced burnout? Because most of us, I don't know, but I'll always tell everybody, I am the slow learner, y'all. I was burnt out for decades. I did not pick this up quick. I was so busy thinking, oh no, I'm fine. Everybody else is struggling and it's just part of it. And I'll just keep going and I'll be okay on the other side. It'll get better.
Yes. And the other side may never come, right? So that's another part of it as well. So no, I first experienced burnout when I was working professionally in the finance sector at a very large company. I was working in basically the salesy side of finance, but very much a competitor growing up. So I loved anything where I had to get my numbers and show that I could do it. And so as a woman in that space too, I really wanted to have numbers behind me because I was just very aware of being surrounded by men. And so I just thought that would be the best way forward for my career. And I really thought I could do that forever. I was like, this is corporate badass Steph. She's going to be doing it. No problem, and have a great life. And that's the beginning and the end of the story. But unfortunately, or fortunately, within, 5-6 years in my career, I really found that I was emotionally exhausted beyond the actual work at play. We were all living through huge movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and I found that the work I was doing was no longer meaningful or impactful to me in a way that I felt aligned with my values. So I had one day, I remember everything was building up as it does, compounding, and one day I just said everything has to stop. And it was a Thursday, I remember, and I was like, I'm not going to work tomorrow. I can't. I can't even get out of bed right now. I just need to shut everything down, like turn off my phone. And it was really scary because I'd never experienced that up until that point. I think everyone has moments of, oh, this is a terrible day, just sleep it off. But this was visceral in my body. I was having health issues prior to this for months. I wasn't digesting my food very well. I wasn't hungry. I was nauseous all the time. There were just so many signs leading up to this that my body was rejecting this experience before my mind was, which again, I feel is often the case. But yeah, everything had to stop. And it was so painful and such a humbling moment that I think people love to hear these stories of, oh, someone, you go through this whole mental breakdown or you have this moment of change and you're like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, please, at least in my generation, take the time, whatever you need to do. But for me, I was so ashamed. I was like, I'm crazy. Everyone's like, she's losing it. She is a mess. And I hated that. I'd come from a family where you get your stuff done and you keep going and you never stop. And when I had to stop, I really was disappointed in myself. I was ashamed. And I think for better or for worse, it led me to where I am today with my own business. And so I'm so happy that I mean, I'm not happy it got to that point, but at the same time, everything happens for a reason. And I really did find that it redirected me to a much better path, but at the expense of my own mental and physical health. So I would love to not let other people get to that point and hopefully find a smoother transition into their other career, what have you, instead of having a whole quit your job, move away, and start over. So that's a little bit about my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. That is so very relatable on so many levels. And I think one of the things I hear so often in conversation as people come to work with me is, they've taken the burnout quiz and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm a habanero, I'm a ghost pepper. Oh my gosh. And I
Right,
think I've been a ghost pepper for a lot longer than I realized.
right.
That's when you're that level 5 and you're so hot you're not. And one of the things as people come into the unveiling method, especially when we're really starting to unpack things after foundation builder, and it's the guilt and the shame storm that comes because there are these societal norms and these self-imposed expectations that my worthiness, my value, my enoughness is directly tied to my productivity.
100%. And it's so the person I always think whenever I'm questioning myself, even now, is who benefits the most from this mindset of mine of, oh, I'm not doing enough, I'm not working enough, etc. And it's never me. I'm not, that's not helpful. So I find too that I being ashamed of that is such a again, it's just not real. It's not reality. And it really is taking the time to say, hey, if your friend or family member was going through this exact same thing, you would not look at them and say, be ashamed and you're a failure or what have you. It really is survival at that point. Again, within your body. I had lost 10 pounds and that had never happened before. And as soon as I got out of that, the next week, I was digesting my food so much better. I was just so much more calm. I mean, granted, I was anxious and worried about my future and thought I'd thrown everything away. But at the same time, I felt it immediately in my body again that I needed that more than anything. And I always heard again other people saying, "Oh, you get really stressed. People develop tumors from toxic jobs or relationships or what have you." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that happens to them, but that would never happen to me." And that's just not reality of it. We are never immune to anything that mental health wise or what have you. And it's only takes a few trips and turns to then be susceptible to your own sacrificing of your mental health or your body. And so I just want everyone to feel safe and understand that this is so normal. I just wish someone had told me this is normal. Like everyone goes through this. You're not alone and no one's talking about you. No one's saying, "Oh, she's such a disaster." It really is just people are like, "Okay." I never got a bad comment really. If anything, most of the comments I got when I quit my job and was taking time off was congratulations. And that was so validating for me. So just want to say that to anyone else listening that it really is an accomplishment to take care of yourself more than anything.
It it is a place of reclaiming our power, our personal inner knowing and alignment too.
Yes.
And I think when you when you said you just felt like you were losing your mind, I mean, I talk about that when I was in the worst burnout and I was at that place of like everything just has to stop.
Yeah.
My body was shutting down. Everything had to stop because my body was stopping. There was absolutely there were no reserves. I
Mhm.
couldn't pull anything else from the tank. I hadn't garnered even a little bit of get up and go that I had been pulling from to keep pushing forward and powering through. There was nothing left.
Right.
And at that point, it is can be terrifying. But I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was going crazy.
Mhm.
I couldn't remember things. And
Right.
it was just and I had 2 little kids, and I'm going, "Oh my lord, am I gonna, like, forget a kid at school, or I'm gonna leave a kid at the grocery store?" I mean, like, I would
Right.
I would be headed home, and I would get in my head, I would just it was like I completely disassociated, lost track of time. I would end up on the other side of town, completely missed my house, and I was just like, "How did I get here?
Mm,
Where was I going?"
right.
And
That's scary.
it is just one of those things, and I don't think enough of it's talked about, and I think one of the things that you do really beautifully is you created and you're creating community, and I love that this is our topic this month because when we talk about community and burnout, it is burnout in my research and in the conversations that people are having. Think about this just real quick. Just think about your own life for a sec, guys. Ladies, humans, how isolated have you become under
Mm,
great stress? How how separated have you made yourself simply through not having the energy to engage?
right.
It's
Yep.
so much easier to turn inward or withdraw because that feels less taxing on your energy. However, in my research, the number one is emotional safety and trust, but number two is belongingness, it's
Mm,
community.
exactly.
And Stephanie, can you tell us what do we find happens most often when we're talking about women and women's health and community? What are the things that you observe? What are some of the biggest problems or challenges that we face right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to this. So, I've done a lot of reading and educating and talking to a lot of mental health professionals and doctors and in the women's health space. And I have found, I mean, I think we all know this, especially as women, but we have completely different factors affecting us just as we operate in the world. So, in my career, working in a male dominated space, there were so many microaggressions every day about myself and little comments or, oh, you're an attractive young woman, so you, etc. And it's little things like that are so dehumanizing, but you get so used to them that it's just a part of the job. And I think most women in their careers, whether wherever space you're in, we have certain things that we just have to take on because of our gender, and that's just the fact of the matter. But with that comes so many other responsibilities, so many other mental health concerns. Families, mothers, I mean, it's just endless. Our responsibilities and our emotional well-being is so connected to so many different parts of society these days, and the world just wasn't built for us. It's just a fact. Even just from the data, men have always been the standard as far as healthcare is concerned. So whether a medication is only tested on men but then prescribed for everyone, it happens in regular, doctors' offices, but also within the medical books that people are being like trained in. It's mostly the male anatomy that they're talking about. So our anatomy and the difference in our bodies alone is just not really being addressed. Only in the last 20 years have there been government mandates that women have to be also within these clinical trials, and not only that, they have to be delineated from the data as far as how that trial affected them. So, all that to say, we have such unique experiences within our bodies and within the world, and that factors into everything of our lives. So, I have found that women need more support, and we are such communal and social beings just naturally. We're so much more empathetic. We get so much more out of sharing that time with each other, but as you get older and as responsibilities accumulate, that goes by the wayside. That's the first thing is our people, our friends, our family. Yes, we, can have those phone calls or the brunches or what have you, but really that's the first to go. And unfortunately, again, we're going to suffer because of that. And you find that so many women are ashamed to be open, especially about what their struggle is, whether that be, relationally with their partners or even just professionally. I didn't talk about my experience at all with what I was dealing with. The one time I did, I was talking to another coworker about it, and she said, "Oh, well, that's that me too." And I was like, "Oh, okay. So we're both having this terrible experience, but we're not talking about it until years later. And also, what are we going to do about it?" It's really such a tough, your back's against the wall in so many ways. And so I just really think that in such an individualistic society that we're in, especially within the United States, it's so important to still be able to lean on each other, man or woman, non-binary, whoever you are. I just think it's really important to have those conversations if you're struggling and be vulnerable. And that bid for connection just from conversations. My mom and I joke now because she goes, "Oh, I tell everyone that you have depression." And I'm always like, "Okay, thank you for that." But it really is this conversation starter among, she golfs a lot, she plays pickleball, she's, older. And so she says it opens up so many conversations about other people's kids or other people's mental health challenges that she's never had before. And if I'm the vessel or the prompt for that, go for it, because that's really my whole business, is say more and sharing your story and having those like conversations and building those, safe spaces for each other to have that. Fine, so be it. I don't mind at all. It's really is funny how once you start opening up the door a little bit to say, "Hey, I've been kind of struggling with this recently," how receptive people will be, hopefully. And again, you do have to find the right people. I'm not saying everyone's going to say, "Oh, me too," or "Tell me more," but at the same time, it's worth it every time to feel like hopefully you can connect and feel less alone. Because isn't that what we're all trying to do, is feel less alone? I know that's my end of the goal all the time. It's just, I really hope to be understood. That's it.
Yeah. To be seen, to be
Yeah.
heard, to be understood, to feel connected to yourself and to others.
100%.
Absolutely. Stephanie, back in the green room, we were having a fabulous conversation. I was like, hang on, we got to take some notes because this is so good. We got to
Yes.
make sure we get this when we record. But you asked a question when we were talking about, we have these standards that we've set for ourselves, but we also have these levels of stress and then the shame tied to the productivity. And when we hit that place of, okay, everything's just got to stop. I'm just so done. I am so fried right now. This has to change. You asked a question. You had a question that you used, which was who benefits?
Mm,
Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
yeah. So whenever, even now that I have my own business, whenever I start to feel guilty about not working enough or not doing enough or every hour not being taken up by making sure I'm a success, whatever that means, I like to check in with myself and say who benefits the most from this mindset. And especially when I was working for corporate, when I was working all hours and really just like got to get the sales, got to talk to the clients, got to check in every time, it was the people at the top. And to be completely honest, it was the white men at the top in my finance organization who benefited the most from me burning out and doing all the things at all hours of the day and making sure the clients are happy and bringing in the revenue. And so that's not working for me. Like I don't want to be a part of that. If my health is at stake, there's nothing that is going to be worth it for that. And we really do need to ask ourselves the question, this productive culture of, if you're not using every hour of the day to be productive, then you're not, you're not a good person, or you're not working hard enough, or what have you. And with women also, the unpaid labor that we just do from like cooking, cleaning, all of that is not even addressed within our, world that we live in as well. So it really is the ticker that we have in our heads of everything that we have to do. And if even just an hour, we say, why can't I just do something for the joy of it? Like that's what I have to do, is I'm going to get nothing from this besides hopefully enjoying myself. And even when I go to the pickleball court or tennis, I'm a athlete. I'm like, okay, I'm burning calories so I can, it's like, just do it for fun. Even if you're not burn in all the calories to have the cake later. It's like, it's such a crazy time to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of what? I find life's too short for that. As cliche as it is, like so many people are getting sick. Like you and I both talked about our health issues that were happening because we were working so much and trying to be everything to everyone. And it really is okay. Am I willing to get cancer for this stuff? Am I willing to really shorten my life and my joy to be the person that people perceive as successful? I don't know. And that's a question you want to ask yourself. And maybe you're not there yet, which I totally get as well. I was like, I don't care. I'll do this for the promotion, for whatever, so that everyone at my work sees that I'm the best. But I got to a point where I was like, this isn't working for me. I'm not eating well anymore. I'm like ill. I'm nauseous all the time. It just, again, I always say your body knows before you do, but I really do hope that people take that time to check in and say, is this for me? Like, is this really working for me? Is this serving me? And are you at the right table alone? I always thought, again, with my old job, I was like, I would never want to hang out with these people outside of work. And that was its own red flag.
Yeah.
I'm not going to happy hours. I don't want to be like them. And I think that's also a check of, oh, okay, then if I don't want to spend any extra time with these people, but I spend all the time of my day for the majority of my work week with them, then like where like my energy is really just being sucked dry. And I just hope that, again, like especially as women, we are such like empathetic and I would say I'm more sensitive. I'll speak for myself, that I just want to be around people who feel similarly to me sometimes, and at least have some more emotional recognition that life is like bigger than the dollar sign at the end of the day. And being in finance, I'm sure people are saying like, this girl should not have even been in finance in the first place, but you're seeing a completely different side to me, right? Like when I was in those spaces, no one would have said, oh, Steph's shouldn't be in this field. It was like, okay, you're doing great. That doesn't mean that should be your career. And same with you, like you've been in the public health space and doing optometry and everything like that, and you're excelling in it. I'm not saying that is not where you should be either, but seeing you thrive and people with disabilities and public health and social, like society as a public health, concern, it's so interesting to you, and you're thriving in that so much more, and I don't even know you that well. So it really is just something that's going to affect you day to day. And I hope that, again, people think a little bit more about what's serving you and what's not, and maybe why that is, because the world wasn't built for us to be like this, honestly.
And I think you bring up a couple of things that are, I'm pulling from them because
Yeah,
they were
go
so
for it.
good. I was just making like little bullet points in my mental
Yeah, yeah.
spreadsheet over here. Number one, it is, especially in finance, because it is this very old system, this old
Yeah.
industry, right? It's been around since, we've been bartering and trading rocks and stones.
Yeah.
But when we look at that and we look at how the industry of finance and media and so many other elements, we're looking at this industrialized model. And if we look at, and it's still being taught, it's slowly emerging. It's like everything else is finally getting, into textbooks now 20 years later, but it's this widget model of we have to be able to take the cookie cutter and pull someone out of here and plug someone else back in here. And it was this wash, rinse, and repeat cycle that workers were expendable and replaceable. And there was always a volume in line to replace them. And we've been training them to fit into these boxes so that we can plug them in and plug them out as necessary.
Exactly.
And when we're in that productivity, that hustle and grind, that's still pervasive in so many places. And there is a subtle shift that's happening. But when we look at the culture of that, especially when I talk about burnout within organizations and company culture, and we're talking about community, this is why this is really important. When we're looking at current engagement rates, and people are really going, okay, so now we don't just have quiet quitting, we have people showing up who are disengaged while they're there. And so we do not have the engagement rates, and we don't have the same quote unquote productivity or performance metrics. We're also looking at the billions upon billions of dollars in healthcare costs that have risen, that are exceeding even our pandemic levels, all stress related right now. And when we're looking at, on average, SHRM and human resources research is showing it takes 1.5 to 2 times the current salary of a position to replace someone.
Ooh,
So if we have a culture that is set up where we are not looking at the well-being of all of our talent, then we are truly doing ourselves as a company and as a society a great disservice. Because as you mentioned, when we're talking about community, we're talking about also gender roles. And we just do have to acknowledge there is a huge discrepancy still. I mean, yes, we have a lot more equality happening, but there are still these internal perceptions. And I'm 50, so you got to remember I'm coming from that
oh yeah,
generation. I was born in the 70s, of, well, you can have a job, honey, and you can go get a degree, but you got to make sure you get that MRS while you're there,
yeah,
right? And you need to have that husband, make sure he's got a good job, and you're going to have the 2.5 kids and the dog in the station wagon, make sure you're volunteering. And I made sure I did all the stuff. And I was exhausted because it was more than I had the capacity to meet because I was going against myself. And
mm,
until I started to have community conversations with other women, and this is why I believe in the power of not just community, but I think when we're talking about corporate culture, I think employee resources groups are really, really important
right,
because even if you're not sure what you need, you can find a group to just get started.
right.
Stephanie, what do you say, or what are the thoughts that you have when we're talking about somebody starting to recognize that they might be hitting that I'm just done. Everything's just having to stop. I'm feeling that it's approaching and I have become isolated or I've become disconnected because I felt like I just didn't have the spoons. I was doing everything I could do. Where do we start from our mental health to begin to connect to community?
Yeah. So lean in. I mean, it's first listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to the core of you saying this isn't right or this doesn't fit me anymore. You can change your mind whenever. That's definitely okay. That's definitely normal. And unfortunately, it normally does, like you said, get to a point where people are so isolated within their own world that it's hard to then start building that community or reaching back out to those people that they had. But don't be ashamed. I think there's so many resources out there, of course. And also there's support groups and what have you. But just start reaching back out to that friend. Or I've made a bunch of new friends as I've gotten older and my life has changed in and of itself. And it's okay to start again and find the people that align with you where you're at in your life. I was living in North Carolina. I was super religious. I had a Bible study. I was going to all that and great friends. I moved to California and I came out as queer, which I always knew I was queer. And I had to make new friends who understood that experience. And that was exactly what I needed. Sometimes the people in your life don't fit for other certain occasions, and that's okay too. So I would just make sure that you start having those honest conversations with friends, especially as women. I was just a bleeding heart when I was in California too, and I was just saying, "This is where I'm at. I'm heartbroken over this situation, and I'm working all this." And people were, especially like my female friends, were just so much more open to sharing their story. And it really does start with vulnerability because that's connection. And to have someone else look at you and hopefully see you and say, yeah, that sounds really hard. I mean, that is what I yearned to hear while I was going through my burnout phase. And it's so validating. And not everyone will fit, right? But you have to keep putting it's like dating. You have to keep putting yourself out there and meeting people who can potentially show up for you. And you show up for them. I think it's such people are this whole experience. Like our again, we're like programmed for connection. Everyone's been saying that. Research has been showing that that fills us with natural dopamine and serotonin, whatever you want to call it. If you want to go from a science standpoint, for me, it really is just even when I don't want to leave the house, because I'm an introvert at my core. And so that also the isolating is really easy for me to do and call that self care and say, hey, I'm staying in. I don't need to go anywhere. This is me taking care of myself. But even just going to the happy hour for a second, you would be surprised how much that your body responds to that and how you might feel better afterwards. I really just think it's so hard, especially post COVID, to feel socially excited about those things again. And I really do want to see people continue to put themselves out there in those ways, just in person or making that phone call to a trusted friend that you already have or family member. It's just don't lose those connections and let people back into your life because they're going to be they want to be back in your life. I trust that people have already built so many great people in their world to help them and assist. And it's like I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I could call them and they'd show up for me," but they never call them. And I'm like, "Okay, well, then use that phone call, let's do that." Like, "Oh, yeah, we don't talk every day, but I could still call them and they'd be there." Then let's use that. Again, there's no shame in it. In fact, it's beautiful. And it's unfortunately too, I'd like to just say that a lot of people feel that they can only use that community when they're out of it, when they're out of the burnout and they figured it all out because that's a safer place to come from. But I'm telling you, you're only doing yourself a disservice from that because you're suffering, and we shouldn't suffer alone. We're not meant to. So please, again, just especially from my standpoint, just make the call, show up to the happy hour. It's gonna day by day, you're gonna start building those relationships back up and it's gonna feel so much better. And just be honest because no one wants to sit around and talk about their next vacation. Everyone really does just want to sit and get real and say, "Hey, I've been struggling with this," or "My relationship is really suffering here." And that's natural. It really is. An hour max if you need it, and then turn it off and go home, and you'll feel so much better. So that's what I would just say is we need each other. And I really don't underestimate the value of that because it's so powerful.
Oh, I just have all of the happy tingles listening to you say all of this because there is such tremendous power and transformation. And we talk about emotional contagion, and we always talk about it from the standpoint. I always say, well, what are you spreading that's contagious?
Mhm.
And what are you catching that's contagious, right? And when we're talking about community, I think that's one of the things that we have to really talk about here as we're wrapping up as well, Stephanie. And that is, what are some insights or like your best tip to find the community that is spreading the right kind of emotional contagion in your world? Because I've seen and been and joined some support groups going in to look for help, going, I'm ready to be vulnerable. I'm ready to share this suck. This is miserable and I'm suffering and I'm agonizing and I want to connect and help. And I get in there and it's like, oh, this just made me feel worse. This was just, I got the ick. I will never
Totally.
walk back in that room again, or I will never go back to that Facebook group or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we start that? Like what are some of the things that you can suggest to people to start finding a community, or what are the red flags even? I mean, what do we do? How do we do this, Stephanie?
Yeah.
For
My
our own mental health.
Yeah, my uncle and I talk a lot about this because him and I have both moved around the country a few times, and so we always say cast a wide net and then edit. And I think
Ooh, I like that.
yeah, so we always start with, whether you're meeting new people or reconnecting with old people, give people, a few chances. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not super, again, especially building that intimacy takes some time. But at the same time, you can always edit. I mean, I'm in my protect my energy era right now. And so I have edited down, and not to say you cut people off and you cancel them out. I'm just saying the level of intimacy or vulnerability I'm with them is going to be a little bit different depending on how safe the space is. So my circle right now is so small, and it's just because I'm very sensitive right now to any kind of feedback or advice or what have you. I'm just like, I'm trying to just take care of Steph right now, and the rest will fall into place. So I only have like a couple people that I really talk to on a like, this is detail by detail what I'm going through, whereas others I just kind of give them the highlights. So I just think there's so many people out there that you can get along with, and whether it's, oh, I play sports with this person, but this person is the one I call for an emergency. That's natural, that's fine, but just make sure that you keep being open to the possibility of people surprising you and showing up for you if you need it. And not it won't all work, right? But I think there's an oversharing balance here, like what you're saying. If sometimes you leave a situation, you're like, oh, that just felt icky. We just ranted and it was a bad rant. It didn't even feel good at the end of it, or I didn't feel seen at all. And that's also okay. And I think they always say like vulnerability with discretion, right? And making sure like there is a safe space, or there's not just, I always think of it as like, I want like a stern older sister in my life. I want someone who's like, yes, that's awful, but also like, how are we going to address this or move forward or learn from it. I want someone who's going to hold me accountable. That's just my personal way. I want a therapist that's going to hold me accountable. Everyone in my life, I want them to be able to be honest with me. And I think I'm get this high and mighty of, oh, I know exactly what's right and what's working and what's not. And I think it's good to be humbled. I think like shame, whether it's, not body shame or something that's toxic, but sometimes shame is a good thing with being like, oh, I need to check myself. And when you leave certain areas or situations where it really isn't kind or like productive, I think we've all been in that scenario, especially around groups of women sometimes. You want to check in and say, okay, maybe I'm going to limit how much time I spend with those types of people. And that's okay too. Again, I always say, like, you don't have to be friends with everyone, and people who are offended by that, that's their problem. But I just, from a community standpoint, these are your people. These are gonna be the people in your life. It's so important who you pick to be in your circle. That's your whole world again. So edit down, cast the net when you feel like it, edit back down. That's totally natural. And just check in with how you're feeling afterwards with any interaction. I've done it many times, and everyone's in their own world. So I don't think, like, even when I've edited down, I haven't had any pushback or any notice. There's no noticeable conversation I need to have. It's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to see them once a month now. That wasn't a great interaction, and that's fine too. So I just want people to be very cognizant of who they spend their time around and how they feel afterwards, because that's so telling as well. But again, don't not put yourself out there for those reasons. Continue to bid for connection every time you have a conversation and just try and be honest. So yeah, that's what I've seen in my personal life and with friends and other family members. And it ebbs and flows. And you're not always gonna be best friends with everyone. And that's okay too.
And that is okay too. Absolutely. So, Stephanie Kaiser, how can people get in touch with you and say
Yes.
more in women's mental health?
Yes. So, speaking of community, obviously my organization is Say More, and ultimately it's an online platform for people to find other people like themselves. So, while we're talking about this and support groups and everything like that, Say More is ultimately a web forum where you can go on and write about your story or join communities that already exist around certain, whether it be a mental health topic or a life circumstance like fertility, miscarriages has been kind of coming up a lot on Say More. So you can find us at saymoreco.com on social media. We're Say More Co. Co. And that's where I am. Again, we're building this positivity within the internet that I really think exists. Say More is for everyone, but a lot of it is focused on women's mental health and kind of debunking a lot of the experiences that we're having and recommending therapists or doctors who specialize in certain areas that you've either worked with or heard about. That's also our end goal, is to provide valuable resources that are more meaningful to individuals today, depending on your experience. So I'm Stephanie Kaiser. I'm the founder. Yeah, I started it because of my own mental health journey, and I really had a great support system, but I wanted to find other people who understood exactly what it felt like to experience depression and how I experience it. End goal for Say More is honestly AA style communities, honestly, of just a safe space for people to go and say, this week really sucked. I really struggled with X, Y, and Z, and have people nod and, really feel safe and comfortable in those spaces. So yeah, I hope you all, check it out, join. If something resonated with you, I hope you share your story on Say More, and you'd be surprised who else will also, comment and interact with you as well. So again, I'm just grateful to be doing this kind of work. I'm so passionate about it, and I hope that everyone, gets what they need out of Say More if they need it. So,
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And all of the links to check out Stephanie Kaiser and Say More will be down in the show notes. So go check out Say More. Go find your community. Go
yeah,
get vulnerable and be there where you can connect and
yes,
find connection with others and within yourself through that connection. Thanks so much for joining us this month in our October community series and today's conversation around community and women's mental health. We'll see you next week, guys. Take care.
thanks.
Gratitude flows as we come to the end of another incredible episode of Beyond Chronic Burnout. Thank you for being part of this life giving journey. I'm Carole Jean Whittington, and I'm inspired by your commitment to growth and restoration. Keep applying these insights to your life, and remember, we're here every step of the way together. Share this podcast with others who could use a boost of energy and to know that they're not alone. Let's create a ripple effect of compassionate curiosity about who we are. Until next time, take care, stay energized, and keep thriving, my friend.
Thanks for being here. It's been quite a ride. Energy mastery, let's turn the tide. Top shelf guests, dropping wisdom bombs. Join us next week, where the energy's strong. Beyond Chronic.